I just woke up. Hello. My name is Aneta. I'm the owner of Cross-Stitch Vienna, and this is my FLOSSTUBE. This is FLOSSTUBE episode 18. I have been great. It's summer, very hot. And this summer I have been extremely preoccupied with Cross-Stitch Vienna. On one hand, we have the stitchalong, which I launched. I wonder if you can hear the emergency outside, the emergency that is modern world. So the stitchalong, which is now wrapping up the first month of releases, the first 3 releases. This is excluding the frame, which was available immediately after purchase, and it has still 7 releases to go. After the Harvest 2026 Spooky Stitchalong by Cross-Stitch Vienna. This is keeping me busy because I keep adding, reading up, researching the folk traditions and rituals. It's a bottomless well, honestly. There are so many academic journals and books because these are my main sources. I, of course, refer to articles if they have been written by people that also have researched folklore and have been in this topic for quite some time. I try to, in addition to my anecdotal evidence, which I remember from childhood, to add the research back layer of information, and there is plenty of that. There are many academic journals that are dealing exclusively with folklore, so I'm trying to dig through the archives that are available online, which I still have access to, and that is keeping me busy, and it's also extremely interesting, so I'm gladly jumping into this mine of information head first. Other things that are keeping me busy, so I'm still releasing some charts for Cross-Stitch Vienna. There have been some quiet releases. I don't really post them on social media. I'm kind of taking a break, with the exception of my Facebook group, Facebook page, which has some automated updates. So if you're following me there, you're probably getting notifications about new articles, and also my Discord server, which I also set up to have a channel where there are automated updates for my blog and also automated updates for the shop. So if a new product is added, then there is a message sent to that channel with a link to tell people that this is happening. And I think I'll go back to the usual programming after the stitch along. So in October, as I'm also trying to refresh some of the customer areas on Cross-Stitch Vienna and build out the community quests, which are now paused. I am swimming in whips. I am drowning in whips. This is probably the most in terms of whips I've ever had at one time. Looking at my project planner, I have 7 whips. It's stressing me out. But I also have so many ideas. I think not spending time on social media, or just like not spending much time online and reading a lot, is really juggling my 2 brain cells to do some more designing. Anyway, why am I recording this FLOSSTUBE right now? Like I said, it's been a month of the stitch along releases, and I wanted to talk about the stitch along and the first 3 releases and what inspired the elements in the stitch along, and I thought this is a good time to do so. I will not be discussing the entirety of it because we have still 7 releases ahead of us. I don't want to spoil anything, and also this information, the stuff that I'm going to be discussing today, has been extensively covered on my blog. So certain articles only the stitch along participants can access, but majority of them are open to everyone, so you can go and read up if you like that. But I know that reading these extremely lengthy, yes, I am aware that I write a lot, maybe too much. But if you're reading, you're not stitching, and everyone knows that time is precious. Yeah, so I'm going to give you an introduction to the most important aspects around the stitch along right now. So let's show it first, shall we? So this is where we are at. The frame, like I said, the frame was available when you purchased the stitch along. This was part 1, this is part 2, and this was part 3. Nelly! I love that little skeleton. Irina called her Nelly, and I've just decided this is it. How cute is she? And I just realized that I am missing 2 stitches in the lantern. Happens a lot recently. I'm probably thinking too much. You wouldn't, expect me to, but yeah, I need to add these, but you cannot really see them, so I will just be agonizing over that in silence. Yeah, so this is the stitch along so far, the after the harvest stitch along. I will be looking at my screen because there's so much information. I don't want to say something incorrect, quoting from some of the articles that I have written. So first of all, why after the harvest stitch along? After the harvest months, the wrapping of the harvest months were very important in terms of thanking for the harvest, but also preparing for the upcoming harvest, because the Slavs and the Slavic people were extremely attuned to nature. You could only sow in spring, and then the growth was happening when the weather was getting warmer, and finally you were reaping what you sow in summer towards the first month of autumn. There has been some research regarding the timekeeping of the ancient Slavs, and according to some of the research that I have found, I have a quote here from The Magic Circle of Time by Nikita Tolstoy, who wrote, "Thus we have at our disposal a vast amount of ethnographic data concerning the fact that the Slavs in former times and in the remote villages and regions almost up to the present day have divided the year into 2 halves, winter and summer, not into quarters." So it was very important for them. The weather was very important to them to kind of set out the pace of how they farm and collect food to prepare for the colder months. And the division of the year kind of fell alongside the 2 solar equinoxes. So the first one is around the 20th of March, so that's spring equinox, and then the autumn equinox was 23rd September. And these were signaling the major shifts in the weather patterns. This was all motivated by the need to survive. So it's not extremely poetic to think about it. Back in the day, people obviously don't have the science or the research that we have today, so what they explained, the changes in the weather patterns or the storms or the drought, they were using folklore to understand the world around them, to make sense of what's happening, and also to, I think this is a very human thing, to delegate the responsibility for the danger of nature and the capriciousness of nature to something bigger than them. And this is, I think, it is the foundation of religion, that there is some higher entity that you can pray to and perhaps influence, definitely not offend. The spring rituals were very much calling forth a good harvest and hoping for a good harvest. The autumn rituals were very much about thanking for the harvest, whatever it was, and then preparing for the next year's harvest, a grand cycle again. You'll note that the summer rituals, the summer festivals were less involved, I would say. So they were the rituals of first harvest, because the first, the last, in between were very important for the Slavs. I'll talk about it in a bit. But they were also more about how to keep safe. For example, not staying out in the field at noon, to not be struck down by a sunstroke, which was brought upon by Powodnica, making sure that there was the Ivan Kupala night, so like you participate in the divinations, and you were hoping for marriage if you were a single lady or a bachelor, and usually the marriages were happening after the harvest in winter months. I wanted to discuss a topic that's really fascinating and present across. The weather is going a bit bonkers. I'm gonna close the window. What I wanted to discuss is the liminality. And I'm not talking about liminal spaces as presented in modern internet lore, so liminal land or backrooms. I'm talking about the simple moments of transitions that are actually happening all the time, because we are always in a state of liminality. There is a before, during, and after. And for the Slavs and Slavic people, liminality was almost setting out the behaviors, and every step of transition was accompanied by rituals that were supposed to ease the change, equip people with good intentions, with good luck as they are stepping into a new chapter, or they are, for example, maturing into young adults from young kids, which comes with responsibilities, but also higher regard in a community. I wrote an entire article about it, but I wanted to focus first of all on the definition of liminality to kind of set the stage for it. And this one comes from EBSCO, and it goes: liminality is a concept that originates from anthropology and psychology, referring to the transitional phase individuals experience when moving between two distinct stages of life. Often described as being betwixt and between, liminality embodies a state of uncertainty and transformation, typically triggered by significant life events such as a job loss, marriage, or the death of a loved one. The term derives from the Latin word limen, meaning threshold, symbolizing the point of transition from one existence to another. When it comes to folklore, liminality is very much about seasonal changes, so changes in the weather, but also changes in like marital status, adolescence, marriage, having a child, death. It all is surrounded by rites of passage, as discussed by a French ethnographer and folklorist, Arnold van Genève, I don't know if I'm saying it properly, I'm just put the name on the screen, who wrote a book in 1908, The Rites of Passage, and he describes 3 distinct ceremonial patterns that surrounded these different transitional periods. There were the preliminal rites, so rites of separation. For example, when you were entering a household, you will wipe your shoes, drag mud into the household, or you wash your hands, so the rituals of purifications. When it comes to weddings, that these were extremely important. For example, cutting hair of the bride, or in Polish folk traditions, swapping a wreath for a cap, which are actually very beautifully embroidered. Then there were the liminal rites, so these were the threshold rites, the transition rites, the actual moment of transitioning, which could be shorter or longer. These were occurring around pregnancies, equinoxes, funeral, daybreak and nightfall, or ceremonies of the full moon on New Year's, but also crossing into someone's territory. And then there were the post-liminal rites, so actually the after the harvest kind of falls into that group, so the rites of aggregation and incorporation, so marriage, sharing a meal or a drink, and libations, or living visits to the ancestral graves, so veneration of the dead. And because the transitional periods were quite sensitive, the definition mentioned uncertainty, they were also dangerous. In Slavic folklore, liminality is connected to physical places, not just states, and also they are connected, the liminality is connected to natural occurrences. I have a whole article that describes these different main physical spaces or natural states, such as bridges, crossroads, the fog, the water, and probably the most present liminal space would be the threshold and the door in a Slavic cottage. So this is why the first part of the stitch along, it was a door with a guardian of the household. So in certain parts of Europe, in South Slavic beliefs, there was a guardian of the house that lived under a threshold, a white snake, and the white snake was usually an embodiment of a dead ancestor. So it was a continuity of one's family. They were supposed to be taken care of, so bowls of milk were left out by the threshold to feed the white snake. He was not supposed to be harmed, and if you treated him well, you could expect a reward, not just in the fact that the white snake would protect the household, but also it could teach you about the herbs or teach you the language of the animals. You'll see that in the stitch along, the door and also the windows are very, they were also entryways, so they could be considered part of the topic of liminality, but they were, I think they were not as discussed as the door specifically in the literature that I found. You will note that the door, the windows are ornate, parts of the house exhibiting some patterns. So I added that. It is not very common for Polish Slavic cottages or just Polish cottages to have ornaments. I've done, when I was designing this chart, it's taken me several months actually, because I had the idea for it in December. I looked at the Polish cottages that I remembered when I was younger, and this is what I remembered. I have been to Zakopane once, I think, and the Podhale region cottages, they tended to be nicer, but the ornaments were carved into wood and they were wooden structures. They tended to have at least one more floor, so it wasn't just ground floor, and they were much more imposing than the cottages that I remembered from in my village. This really is about the environmental changes, the availability of different resources, and also the regional culture. But of course, this type of cottage does not look very nice in a stitch along. I also wanted to make it fun for myself. This is my first ever stitch along actually. As a cross-stitcher. So I researched a little bit more and I came across, of course, the Zalipie village in Poland, which is famous for the ornaments that look like embroidery painted inside and outside the houses. And I also came across a lot of photos of Russian houses, which tended to also be quite nice. So there are two major concepts when it comes to ornate houses in Russia. So there are the ornamental windows called nalichniki, the ornate wooden window frames in Russia, and there's an entire website that documents them if you wanted to take a look. So these are extremely beautiful. Again, from my understanding, from what I have researched, so these ornamental constructions, they are very much very recent actually when you think about the architecture. So go from like half-dak ziemianki that the Slavs lived in between the 6th and 11th century to these more elaborate, beautifully painted constructions. So these ornamental villages, houses, that's more like 18th, 19th, 20th century. So it's quite recent development. And there are also other constructions which I've read about in The Guardian. So these are the Soviet wooden cottages, a fairy tale wooden world, The Guardian writes, of USSR dachas. So these were rural cottages that were painted in beautiful colors and made to look fairy tale-like, and these were usually rented by writers, architects, and those that were looking to escape the city. So there was also a period in Polish history when the village, the cottage life was glorified and written about as the simpler, truer existence, especially by writers that wanted to escape the bustle of the city to get closer to nature. But it was written from a perspective of someone that does not live in the countryside, so what they see is colorful houses, but they do not know the daily life of a peasant, of someone that has to farm the land and work, so which gets dirty. They only know the surface level beauty which exists, but it is enjoyed after the work was done. So that's what inspired my cottage, and I made the colors a bit more toned because I didn't want them to be too jarring. I think the entirety of the stitch along is very dark colors. There's a lot of black, there's a lot of dark blue, orange and purple to break up the darkness of the colors. There are like spots of red and green to add some color, and you'll see that the frame itself, like, it has like this lacing pattern. Some apples and pumpkins, the harvest fruit and vegetables that people associate with autumn. I mean, pumpkins are not traditionally Slavic, but I did want to include them because, I mean, it's kind of like a modern cross-stitch element when it comes to autumn. Like, you have to have a pumpkin. Another element that I would like to draw your attention to is this sheaf. This is the last sheaf of the harvest, and connecting to the liminality, the importance of firsts, in between, and the lasts. So this transitional period, the last sheaf was also celebrated. It was considered to be the house of the spirit of the field. In Slavic regions, it was sometimes called Veles's beard, and therefore a spirit inhabited this last sheaf. It was also kept until the next year to use in the next farming cycle. It was sometimes kept inside the house and decorated, and sometimes it was dressed in clothes, usually female clothes, because in certain parts, especially in Russia, Lithuania, the last sheaf was also a personification of some of the entities, such as Mother of Grain or Baba Yaga even. So it was dedicated to them and therefore dressed and used during the after the harvest processions, the celebrations. It was displayed at the harvest feast, and alongside the fruits of the labor, and, for example, bread. Bread was a very important element of the harvest feast. This I will talk about later in the stitch along releases, but it's one of these. Is one of the foods that were associated with the harvest. You will notice that in this ornamental window there is a candle, and that in the third release we have a skeleton standing next to a naked tree, a dead tree, one could say. So the liminality of autumn equinox made it similarly to the spring Jade, which is another period of veneration of the dead in spring. The autumn Jade were the time to think about the ancestors and their spirits and welcome them back into the world. Many people, especially the neo-pagans, will say, or Wiccan will say, that the veil is thin around the end of September, around the equinox, so the spirits can cross into the world of the living. This is true also for the Slavs, although they do not have this this metaphor of the veil. Basically, what they understand is that the liminality that surrounds them every day just is more significant around the equinox, the autumn equinox. So we have a personification, a skeleton that symbolizes the spirit of one of the ancestors that brought its own lantern and is heading towards the candle that's put in the window to guide the welcome spirits back into the home and invite them to a meal. The fire also acts as purification against the evil spirit, so it's both an invitation and also a warning to the spirits that were not buried properly, that are left wondering, that the fire has a cleansing power and therefore they should not enter the household. One tradition, which I hadn't actually realized was this big, even though I did participate in it when I was a child, is mushroom hunting. And apparently it remains a strong tradition in modern Poland. Finally enough, I came across a Reddit thread about how Polish people, it was by a foreigner that was living in Poland, how Polish people are guiding, like secrets, their favorite mushroom hunting spots. And they will be very offended if you ask them about such spots. I don't know. We actually used to go out with my dad to a forest around like autumn time to hunt for mushrooms. He made out love that kind of stuff, so he loves fishing, he loves mushroom hunting. We would go out into this one forest every year, and there was a tradition that we got to the forest, you find a stick, and then we look for mushrooms, and then we make our way up towards this stone bench where we will have breakfast and where we'll also compare the mushrooms that we picked. And usually Dad will say, this is good, this is not good, this is poisonous, and this is completely rotten, so just chuck it up. So to honor this tradition, there are also a lot of lore regarding mushrooms, especially in Czech Republic or Slovakia. There are lots of sayings. And in Latvia, there is an entity, a goddess, one of the 68 goddesses, called Mother of Mushrooms, which is still invoked as people enter the forest to pick the mushrooms. And she is supposedly taking care of the mushrooms and making sure they grow and remain healthy, and calling out to her before you enter the forest is supposed to make sure that you find many mushrooms. So to honor this tradition, to take note of it, also the tree that the ancestor is standing to has two types of mushroom. This is witch's butter, which grows on dead trees. It's supposedly not edible, but it looks really nice. It's like a buttery yellow mushroom, and I thought it looked interesting. And then we have these purple mushrooms, kind of like toadstools because of the yellow growths on top of them. They are not purple toadstools, but I don't want to include red ones because I was inspired to make them purple. I thought it would be nice and unique, and I love the way they look. That's the story. So that's what we have so far in the stitch along. The threshold, the important part in any cottage, the guardian of the threshold. We have some display of the recent harvest, the protective candle in the window, and also the ancestor that is being invited in for a meal around the autumn equinox and stands next to a tree decorated, surrounded by mushrooms. The other 7 releases are still ahead of us. If you are part of the SAL, you have the schedule. We are going to finish the stitch along end of September, and in October, when I've already sent out the the full pattern to everyone participating, I will also reveal it on social media. I just didn't want to do it before because I'm having fun just stitching, reading, not reading online much, to be honest. I don't think I forgot anything. I will drop all the links to the articles that I have written on the topic, so you can have a browse if you want. I hope that you enjoyed this little explanation of what's behind the design. I'm going to finish my coffee, edit this video, and upload it hopefully still today. Let me know what you think about this stitch along, and if you're interested in the topic of liminality or Slavic rituals in autumn, happy to drop more resources in the comments for you. Take care. Bye.